Should be recording soon.
Yep, I see it recording.
Oh, I've still got a circly thing. Right. Anyway, thank you all for coming to this week's community call. We have 5 UMIPs up for discussion today. We have an omnibus price identifier. The next UMA KPI options, UStonks, UGAS, and then a generalized TVL KPI option price identifier.
That was actually withdrawn, so that's not on the docket for this week.
Oh, that's fine then. Then in that case, we've only got 4.
And I'd also like to just give a brief update on the binary query UMIP, which is basically it hasn't changed. So just going to proceed as is.
Okay, cool. So we don't really need to discuss it unless anyone's desperate for changes.
I just need a better name still, but other than that, I think we all agreed it was good to go.
Excellent.
The SB Awesome binary UMIP.
How about just the Sean Awesome? Then we both get credit, Sean.
Well,
Nice.
you have to like spell it differently.
Yeah, we'll just merge the two.
SHEAN.
Sheen.
Okay, should we perhaps take the UStonks and UGAS identifiers first? As they're quite quick. And we'll wait for Brits and Brews to discuss the omnibus one. So looking first at UStonks, I think that's this one. There was a couple of issues raised. By Ross, who had some queries. In particular around decimals, where he wasn't very sure whether it needed to be rounded to 6 decimals to match USDC. Is that something that needs doing? Or is it not so important anymore?
I mean, they should really have like, I guess, 6 significant figures in their price identifier, but it's not a big deal either way. But they did round to 6 decimal places, so I think it's fine as is and better than the previous UStonks one. Or I think it's the same as the previous UStonks one, which works.
Okay, so there's no significant issues there.
I don't think so, no.
Can I just ask a clarifying question? Is this intended to be launched on the EMP?
Yes.
Okay. So it's exactly the same as the previous UStonks identifier?
Yep. Same with the UGAS identifier.
Okay. I was going to say, I mean, you know, we have this lovely financial template library. That means we should be able to create a generalized identifier for these UStonks. But it might not be worth it necessarily to overcomplicate it right at this point. I don't know.
So Rainus had raised that as well. And if using the EMP, we wouldn't be able to, right? Because we wouldn't be able to define any custom ancillary data.
Yeah. I mean, we have the pre-identifier transformation library, so you could translate between the TWAP for liquidations and then the identifier at settlement. But you are right about the ancillary data. Yeah, okay, it's fine. I think it's fine for now. I mean, it's the next time we do one of these, we'll hopefully have either like moved the EMP into a form where we can use it, or it will have changed in some degree. So it's kind of a stopgap.
Yeah, like I think the FPL is theoretically like the better approach, but doesn't actually save you any UMIP time if you still have to repropose the self-referential ones, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you just really care about like a 2-hour TWAP, right? So you could have like a generalized 2-hour TWAP for that specific, like a UStonks 2-hour TWAP. That just like always trails the price of UStonks. But yeah, and then you wouldn't necessarily need the ancillary data. But I kind of think it's fine to just leave it like this for now. Like we're like not exactly sure of how we want to structure these with ancillary data in the future. So it's probably simpler to just keep it the way we've done it before.
And you're
This
saying,
is time sensitive, so I don't
Yeah,
think there really
I
is
agree.
time to like figure things out.
Yeah,
So while I appreciate it might not be perfect, it's something that works and something that we'll probably stick with for now.
yeah. Let's be pragmatic. That's cool.
Cool. The other thing that Ross asked was about changing things from, oh, I've lost the one now. Sorry, changing from sushi swap to, where is it?
I think he had just listed Uniswap in a lot of places and like the previous UMIPs, but was intending to use Sushi Swap instead, which isn't a problem because Sushi Swap is just a UniV2 fork and our price feeds work the same for both.
That's fine. That's great. And you can feed back to him, Sean, about
Yeah.
the decimals and the sushi swap issue.
Yeah, I left a comment on there about the Sushi Swap thing. So I think it's good.
The only other thing was that you suggested, Sean, that he referred back to the UStonks UMIP, the original one, for the rationale and security. But I kind of prefer how he's done it to avoid dependencies.
It's fine with me.
Yeah, will we just keep it as it is rather than referring back?
Yeah, I don't really care one way or the other. And like, I was just suggesting removing like redundant content, but
Yeah.
it's fine as is.
Okay, so that is basically a go with no issues. And it's just really some feedback to be given to Ross about the questions he asked. The next one that we were going to take was UGAS. This is 330. I don't think there's actually any issues with this one either, or no substantive issues. Yeah, I don't think I think I've just copied 229 here. But I think the only outstanding issue was, again, the query that he had about Uniswap and SushiSwap. But we've already resolved that, so there's nothing else really substantive in this one. So anyone got any issues that they want to raise with the UGAS update one?
I don't. Renus?
No, it looks perfectly fine.
Oh, okay. That one's a go then. Now, can we move now to the omnibus? I know that Bits and Brews isn't here yet, but will we just move on to it? Or do you want to go to the KPI UMA?
I think he's trying to get on now. He doesn't have the invite to the meeting. Can I just copy and paste this link and drop it in there for him?
Oh, yeah, that would be super. Thank you, Brett, if you would do that.
Yep.
Okay, and I'll just find the appropriate. Okay, so this was the omnibus one. 326. There was quite a few formatting issues with it. They're all pretty minor, but it does just generally need tidied up. I think I just closed the wrong one there, sorry. Yeah, there's a few formatting issues that just generally needs tidied up. There's also no rationale section, but the main issue that perhaps people want to discuss is the Bancor price feed issue. Did I just hear you join the call there?
Yes.
It's Bruce, excellent. Would you like to speak to the omnibus price identifier?
Yeah, I can.
Super.
So yeah, I guess I saw that a implementation of the Bancor price feed got linked in. I don't have it in there currently in the actual document. I think I just have Bancor listed as a market source. But yeah, I can go ahead and remove that because it definitely sounds like it's going to be a lot more work to get a robust price feed implemented for Bancor than.
Yes, because currently it's definitely not production ready. Just I was testing the concept whether or not it works, but I would also need some support for test implementation just to make sure it's perfectly correct.
Yeah. So then it sounded like maybe there were concerns about the market size for, I think it was MPH, I think, without the Bancor market included. Because what was it, like 40% or something of it was on Bancor?
Yeah. Most I think also liquidity for MPH was on Bancor, so I think we missed quite a large share of Bancor. So it doesn't make sense, I think, to skip it. So rather just revisit this price identifier when we have the Bancor.
Can I say one thing real quick? Sorry, Aaron. On Wednesday, we have a call set up with 88 miles per hour to discuss some KPI options. What should we do there? Should we, is this something that we can find another price identifier for, or is this something that, or a price feed for, or is this something that we should just, put a hold on with them too for a while, or will it be by the time we get everything figured out, will we have a price feed set up for Bancor?
Is it for KPI options or call options or what?
I'm not quite sure. EA and Clayton probably know a little bit more about that than I do. I just know that there's a call going on Wednesday. So I can get with EA Sports and ask them exactly what they want, but they're like on a different time schedule than us. So like they keep pinging me at like 4 o'clock in the morning with the questions, and I'm doing my best to relay them to you guys, but that's kind of the thing. We have a Telegram set up with them, and there's supposed to be a call on Wednesday, I believe, the 24th, and we'll know more details then. So that's all I know.
If it is for KPI options, I'm guessing these price identifiers wouldn't need to be used anyways. If it's for call options, then probably would.
And I think even for call options, if it's non-liquidatable, then it might not be as big of a deal to have a price feed written, right? Because you don't need bots running to liquidate. You just need to calculate it once.
Oh, I see. You just query it at the end or whatever.
Right. I mean, it would be easier if we had a bot with a price feed written, but I don't think it's necessarily a showstopper. So if you get a more accurate price from Bancor and we don't have some Bancor JavaScript ready, I think it would still make sense to have Bancor be the data source if we're just going to call it expiry and then just do extra work.
One downside with that, and part of the reason why like it's quite a strict requirement that we have running price feeds for these kinds of things, is that the disputer bot won't work then, right? Like if you don't have a price feed, then like the disputer bot needs to be there sitting to verify the proposals. And if we don't have a feed, then we'll need to be manually acting as the disputer, which is fine. I mean, it could technically work. It's just, I have quite a strong preference that like all possible identifiers the optimistic oracle could see, we should be able to automatically dispute. Doesn't really scale if we're reliant on us like being online to verify the price. I mean, it's fine, but think quite strongly that we should like try and have a Bancor feed for this, if that's the case. Do you agree with that, Sean?
Also, yeah, I agree with that. And we have taken a more lenient approach with things that are non-liquidatable, because like we're not ever going to have price feeds for things like KPI options. But like I think a Bancor price feed is more widely useful than just like call options or whatever's being created here. So I think it's worth waiting for anyways.
Is there anything on the engineering roadmap about creating price feeds for Bancor? Is it on anyone's radar?
No.
How big an issue would it be to get on the radar?
The way we like to do these kinds of feeds is that the proposer for the UMIP or the team that wants to use it should like write the code, write the tests, write all the integrations, and then the engineering team can review it. Because it is quite a lot of lift. Like we're talking, probably like 300 lines of code kind of thing. And it needs to be tested quite thoroughly. So yeah, there is obviously a trade-off here, but yeah, we try to err on the side of not implementing these feeds if possible, as has been the case with like probably the last 3 or 4 feeds that we've added to the protocol monorepo.
We've discussed with the Bancor team in the last UMIP that we put through for their call options. It was probably about a month or maybe a bit more ago where this exact conversation came up. And there is expressed interest from the Bancor team to actually put in a price feed for this. So given that we already have one UMIP that's passed that would benefit from a price feed implementation, and in this UMIP would also benefit from a price feed implementation, there is scope for us to ask the Bancor team to actually just simply do that work for us.
Yeah, and I think Renus has already done, like I looked at your code, it looks like probably 80% of what we need. Like there needs to be unit tests, obviously. And like you said in your comment, like there might be some additional event querying. Like I didn't go super deep, but from what I saw, it looked like most of the way there. So I think most of the work's already done.
Renus, are you intending on finishing it?
Oh, I could try, but I'm definitely not comfortable with doing unit tests. Like I haven't done that, so I definitely will need some help on testing it properly.
Okay.
Chandler, are you in regular contact with the Bancor team? Would you be able to say that we have a price feed that is in a draft state? And would you be able to get one together fairly quickly so that we could integrate with them?
At the very best I can ask. We're in somewhat frequent contact with the team. I guess the main discussion from their point of view would be how much of a priority this is and when they can get something up and running. So if it might actually be useful for me to understand how important this UMIP is from the UMIP writers and what are the implications behind that, so I can translate that to the Bancor team quite effectively.
Why don't we just, you can also split this UMIP, right? They're like, this doesn't necessarily need to block all the identifiers that's in here. We could simply just remove the ones that are dependent on Bancor and then make those dependent on the price feed. And then, because everything else uses Uniswap and SushiSwap or Crypto Compare, Crypto Watch. So that could be another option to not block the other stuff. But yeah, your point's pretty valid, Chandler.
It also sounds like we're not even sure that there's a requirement for these price identifiers. So
Yeah, it sounded like there might be a pending one for the 88 MPH, but yeah, I don't know if there is one for the NDX.
okay.
I don't think there is one for NDX, but I think MPH is reasonably serious.
About KPI options or call options?
They're
I think-
serious. They're serious about something. Sorry. They're serious about something. It was just a matter of what we were gonna do with them. And we'll know more like on the 24th. So it isn't that big of a hurry for anybody to have to break their neck over to get done or to push. But that's cool that Bancor kind of owes us a favor, you know, so maybe they can help us get that finished for some of these other ones. And then going forward, we'll just make sure we check that there's proper price feeds before we go into these places and try to get them something, you know, some kind of financial contract. Because the other ones, it was just ones that we had mentioned, like I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, to put in the omnibus. And the only reason AP Wine was in there is because Grod had he's pretty big in that community and stuff like that. So we just threw that one in there, and the 88 miles per hour one, just because we knew we had this meeting coming up on Wednesday. So
Is there
I
any?
think it's sensible to try and split this somehow. And separate out MPH and NDX. Those are the only two with significant Bancor liquidity. Can you
Correct.
just confirm that, Bits and Brews?
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah. Okay.
Also, we don't have these approved as collateral types.
Right. I believe there was a separate proposal that was being run through for that.
Yeah, I was working on that. I tried to do a PR for it over the weekend, but I didn't realize you needed a new branch for each PR. Still learning. Sorry if I got everybody tons of notifications. I'm trying to get it up on GitHub, but that one is drafted and ready to go, so I can pull those two out if we want.
Okay. Sounds like that one, just because of like the UMIP schedule, will be for next week though, right?
Mhm.
So it might make sense to just wait on the whole UMIP, because the other price identifiers won't actually be useful until we have the collateral types anyways.
Right.
So instead of separating it out, why not just push the whole price identifier UMIP and align it with the collateral currency?
Do we have confidence that we would get a banker price feed done within a week or so?
More confidence than within 2 days, and
Yeah, no, yeah, because I was
Yeah,
you can
just
visit then, right?
because you may
I
want to
could just-
split it out anyway, just to give us maybe 2 weeks to get the Bancor
Yeah.
thing done.
just to comment on the timeline for that, like normally once it's submitted for review, like if it's all ready, it should be like 1 or 2 days turnaround, but like there might be some feedback. Like we're pretty strict about what code we merge into the protocol repo, so it needs to be like very consistent with everything else.
Mm-hmm.
So it could take a bit longer.
Yeah,
Would
and
that
would
also
say it's
have
gonna
to be
be-
audited, Chris?
I would just say that
Sorry,
more than
Vardy.
likely, if we're not having a meeting until Wednesday, and probably at least another week and a half before we get all the ducks in a row anyways. So 2 weeks out before 88 is needed anyways. So
Yeah, so
But
splitting is fine.
realistically,
Would we also need that audited?
No, we don't audit our JavaScript code. We only
Okay.
audit the Solidity smart contracts. But we're like pretty thorough in the code review process for the other stuff in the repo, is what I meant.
Okay. Cool. I'm quite in favor of splitting these out because I think that the timeline issue doesn't really fit in with the collateral currencies. We might as well get the ones that we can out of the way and keep Bancor ones kind of separate. And they have a known issue that, will run on in the background. How do people feel about that? So splitting it into letting half of it go forward and then putting the MPH and the NDX into a new one with a dependency on a Bancor feed.
I agree with that.
Do you feel okay with doing that even though the collaterals currencies won't go through until next week's vote?
I think we were going to delay the whole thing until next week and then split up the MPH and the NDX.
I don't really see why we don't just get that out of the way already. I mean, obviously the price identifiers can't be used until the collateral currencies are in there. But, you know, they don't necessarily have to go through in pairs. And it's just
okay.
hanging around.
And that's okay. I just wanted to clarify that was okay.
Are you good with that, Sean?
Yeah, I think it works either way. I mean, that's fine with me.
Is there a homepage where I can find all of these, like Notion notes? Like, is there like a master link to something? Or are they all individual links that I have to have?
Sorry.
These documents.
Yeah, the one you're editing. Yeah.
I can send you a link to the UMA checklist, the UMIP checklist.
Yeah, that'd be good. Thank you.
Okay, will do.
Doesn't Henry publish all the notes that you take in the UMIP review channel anyways afterwards?
Henry does what? Yes, he does. He does. Essentially, what I type in here goes up in the announcements channel and out on Twitter and on Discord.
Okay. I probably don't need the link then. I didn't realize he did that. I'll just check that later.
Okay. With the dependencies in a bank or feed. Remaining content go. Okay. So our last one is the UINT price identifier. And this is the next generation of KPI options. There was quite a lot of kind of issues around this, and I didn't really know how to summarize them. But I think the best thing is really for Britt, who was instrumental in getting this together, to speak a little around it and, yeah, for people to chip in.
Yeah, I can. I didn't know if it was like easier to sort of give my take on the latest update or to just sort of like start answering questions.
And maybe if you would just give a general introduction to how
Sure.
it's been done and why certain things have been chosen. That'd be good.
Sure. Yeah. So the idea here was to have it start tracking integrations dating back to June 1st. The idea there was to reward previous efforts of superhumans that maybe aren't going to manifest in the current KPI option when it expires. But then to have that valued differently, since those are sort of considered slam dunk integrations at this point, or like things that are very likely going to happen, to put a little bit less weight on those and really encourage the momentum to keep going after we launch. So there are sort of like two scales here, one for things that we believe are for sure, and then one for things that we hope that come to be. So we are guessing that there are probably like 10 slam dunk integrations with a goal of 25. And sort of last minute, Clayton wanted to add on the idea of having kind of a bonus category. And anything that qualifies for a bonus still sort of gets the like base points for being an integration, but then it gets a bonus value added on top of it with a maximum potential of 4 of those. Just because he didn't want it to be such that maybe we underestimated how easy it was going to get to have those qualifying bonuses. So he put a cap on it that way. And I put together like a little spreadsheet that I sent to Vari to help outline that. But we did kind of work backwards. And I know Sean and Chris both commented on like the weirdness of these values. And it was kind of based on working backwards from some of the things that Clayton wanted to include, specifically like he wanted the amount of coins to go out to be pretty different from the past KPI. So he was thinking either around like 1,000 coins to go out per person or like 30. And we just kind of settled on 1,000. So that was part of it. Also part of it was he was thinking in terms of payout. And so I tried to work backwards to make it not about the payout and more about the value of UINT relative to UMA. But in order to do that, I kind of had to make some assumptions about the USD value of one UMA at the time to try and meet his payout goal. And so we set that all up in a doc. I don't know if you want to pull that up or not, Vari, but
is that the spreadsheet you sent me earlier?
Yes, it is. And so there are many tabs on this spreadsheet, but the one that I thought would be most useful just kind of illustrates sort of the thinking in terms of scaling UINT without talking too much about the payout portion of it. But that is kind of like why those numbers are weird and complex, just to try and like meet the goals that Clayton had in mind in terms of payout. Does that part make any more sense now?
Yeah, it definitely does, and I think this is such a cool UMIP, and I'm really excited for integrations. I think that's a really nice idea. I think the main sentiment of the feedback that I was trying to give is around like it's more of like a meta comment than anything. The way that I look at prices and like the number that the DVM or the optimistic oracle, like what it should return, should just be like a number that answers a question, right? So it's like, what is the price USD ETH on a specific timestamp? Or in the case of this, it's like, how many integrations did UMA get?
Yeah.
And maybe, you could say like a normal integration is 1, and then you have this like bonus factor of like ×4, up to ×4 for a specific integration. And I think the distinction is the way that you had defined it was more like the UMIP would define the payout of the financial contract. So it's like for this number of integrations, how many UMA should we pay out, right? So the question is like defining the payout rather than defining a price that's used to calculate the payout. And the reason I'm trying to think about it like this is just from an implementation perspective. When we actually create the financial contract, it's easier if we have like a numerical number that we can then input into something else, if that makes sense.
It does, yeah. And so you kind of, Vari, if you want to go to the tab that's called current, what's it called? You might have to go to the left a bit. Current plan. Current plan. There you go. I took your feedback and tried to kind of like come up with something that was more along the lines of what you were saying. Like rather than thinking about it in terms of payout, it was just like, what value do we assign to UINT? Because it kind of sounds like the way we want to do it is have the number of integrations be sort of pre-vetted on the Discord by the UMA team. So like as each one comes live, we'll discuss it and talk about, is it an integration or not? So there will sort of be
and we can have a tally as well.
Yeah, so there will be like a live count of how many integrations we've achieved. And then I think the question that we would like to have returned from the optimistic oracle is just, what number value do we assign to the value of uint. So if we get 16 integrations, we would return 0.4667 or something like that.
So does this progression of uint value, that column H, does that go up to 1? Can you just scroll there, Vari? Is it like the max? It
goes up to 1.25, which was the ceiling that I defined, and that would be if we hit those 4 bonuses.
So just from the perspective of the LSP, right, the financial contract that's going to ingest this information, it might be easier to like try and ignore all of this scaling and to try and like work with some of the tools that we've got to try and like ingest the number of integrations, so like the column D, and to like turn that into the payout structure. So an example, we have this like linear financial product library for the long short pair. And what you could do is you could define the range that the financial product operates over being between, let's say, 0 integrations at the lower end and 25 in this case, or you might want to make it like 30 or 29 to include the whale integrations, right? And then all the optimistic oracle needs to do then is return a number anywhere between 0 and 25, right? And then what the financial contract library will do is that calculation in column H. So it'll turn like the number in column D, like how many integrations we got, into a payout, which will then calculate from like a certain number of collateral that we added into the LSP, how much is redeemable on the long side and how much is redeemable on the short side. And I think the big advantage with this is from a voter's perspective. Like, let's say this price got disputed, right? They like can see the tally in Discord was 27 and like they're happy with the number 27. So when they vote, all they need to do is put in the number 27, right? They don't need to like do any math to that number to get like some other number. They just put in that number, and then the DVM is simply answering the question like how many integrations did we get over this time range? And then like the financial contract library can do all the calculation to translate that number into a payout.
Okay. Could we have it so that they input, because we want to cap it at 25 integrations, and then of those 25, if up to 4 of them qualify for a bonus, then they would get that added on top of it. So could we have it so that it returns like sort of like a number and a letter value? So if they returned like 22A, that would mean that there were 22 tallies and no bonuses, versus like 22B might be that there were 22 integrations with 1 bonus.
Not in what we've currently got, but
okay.
Could you not just like double count, right? So you like we have 5 integrations and 1 of them is a bonus, so we just call it 6 integrations, right? Could you do that?
We could. In theory, I kind of asked Clayton about doing that, and he wanted it to feel separate.
I see.
And different, yeah. So like, because if you set the expectation, let's say we call it 29, but the last 4 are the bonus ones.
Yeah.
That sets the expectation of hitting 29. He wants people to like aim for the max of 25. And then if of those 25, some of them are bonus worthy, then that's kind of like gravy on top.
I see.
Yeah. So I mean, I agree with what you're saying. I just don't know how to make that work with sort of like the vision that I was asked to bring to life.
Wouldn't the price still be the same either way though? Like,
I think the payouts are different though for like the bonuses. So it's not like additive.
Yeah.
It's not like you get a half a point. It's like a different kind of thing.
Right. Yeah. Because right now the way that I have it, if it qualifies for a bonus, it's actually kind of double counted, but not proportionately. So like it counts worth the points of a normal integration, but then it also gets a bonus value, which is more than the cost of a normal integration.
Yeah.
So
I mean, that's kind of why I like the double counting, because it's simpler. Like if you know, rather than having like, I mean, remember also we don't have to have like integers here, right? You could have like 2.5 integration points, right? Like the number between 0 and 25 could be like 17.5, right? It's just what I'm trying to do really is like simplify how this number gets consumed in the financial product, because what you've described here, like I don't think it will work super easily. Like the way we could make it work is we make the financial product library go from 0 to 1.25, right? And then we could use your like exact spreadsheet that you've got now, right? And it will like at 1.25, like all the collateral in the LSP goes to the long token holders, right? So if that's like 1,000 UMA, then each long token is worth like a full amount, right? And then like anywhere between 0 and 1.25. So that is an option, right? But all I was trying to do is just think about it from like the number has less, from my perspective, has less meaning if it's like has to go through an equation to get out another number, right? Whereas like if it's like a very clear cut number, like how many integrations with this like rule on top, it seems easier to grok from my perspective, like what the number actually means.
You may need to explain to some folks what grok means.
You don't grok what grok means?
I do. Other people might not.
Yeah, I don't grok. I'm just trying to digest. But go ahead, keep talking.
Wait, so
like Chris's idea, I'm quite worried about this, that there will just be a bit of difficulty at settlement actually trying to get everyone to like agree, and especially when we've got different numbers at different levels, and I just think it becomes a bit messier, whereas 26 is much, it's easier to count up the integrations. I think the whale thing complicates things, but I think that's a simpler problem to get round in a way.
Yeah, and it might be, I mean, because I agree, I like that in part because it keeps the discussion around, is it an integration or not, which is the most important part of this UMIP, is that it is so qualitative. We really want people to be engaged and talking about it and, thinking philosophically about if it's an integration and why not, rather than like, what is a uint worth? So I agree on that front. And maybe the whale thing is something that we just have to simplify to get it to work. We could still use the little like whale thing,
Yeah.
and it just might be like a compromise point that,
I guess
is the best way forward.
in principle, though, couldn't like a financial product library get two numbers with a separator and know how to then calculate from there? Where it's like you have 22,3 and it then combines it.
So maybe that's interesting, because what you would need to do is like encode this number and like a separator and then the second number into a uint, which is kind of wacky, but I like it, John. I like where your head's at, because what you're doing then is you're like using the uint as like an encoding. So I mean, yeah, we could do that, but then we need to write another financial product library and get it audited. So and like have this like one little Lego. But the point that I wanted to make though is ultimately what your spreadsheet does, from what I could see, is like you taking a number of integrations plus some like whale coefficient scaling thing, and you're turning that into a number between 0 and 1.25, right?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
The way the LSP works under the hood is you give it a financial product library, and that thing takes in a price and turns that into a number between 0 and 1. And then depending on what the number is between 0 and 1, it just like shifts the payouts. Either more goes to the long side if it's bigger than a half, or more goes to the short side if it's less than a half. So all we're doing, the way that I see it, is like by moving this, the number that the DBM returns, you're just like bringing the complexity away from the voter and like putting it in the financial contract. And I feel like we should always err on the side of simplifying what's brought on chain as much as possible. Like to Vari's point, you know, like if this gets disputed, or like if there's disagreement, like how do we very easily like converge? Like the simpler the thing people are arguing over, the easier it will be for people to converge. So I kind of think they're the same thing is what I'm saying. It's just where the math is happening is in a different place.
Okay, yeah, and I'm all for that. I guess my big question then would be, what needs to change in the UMIP part of it before vote, and then are we able to do that in time on the back end under the hood?
So nothing should need to change under the hood if we go with the linear financial product library. That's kind of why I'm pushing for it, because it's like built already and being audited right now by OpenZeppelin. So if we go for that route, and by the way, if we still go for the route that uses your spreadsheet between 0 and 1.25, that will also work fine with the current financial product libraries. Like as long as you have a number that fits in a range, it will work with what we've got now. Like if you define a lower bound and an upper bound and it like lands somewhere in between, it will work fine. So yeah, the question really is just like, how do we want to define this number returned between 0 and 1.25, or like 0 and 25 for the number of integrations?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sean, I seem to remember us discussing this at some point. I'm getting vague memories of conversations through pain, my tooth. But didn't we decide that the LSP wouldn't be audited in time because we're in such tight timelines for this, which is why we decided not to do it that way?
I don't remember that conversation. As far as I recall, the intention was always to use the LSP, but I might be mistaken.
Okay.
I was under the same impression as Sean.
Maybe also, I made up my delirium.
Also, I don't think the timeline is super tight on this. And I do think there are a lot of design questions that beyond just like how we price this thing that should still be discussed some more. I think one example of that would be, I noticed, Britt, that the threshold for like a minimum size integration was removed from the latest UMIP. And I think that's something that could have like potentially big implications on the incentives that this thing actually creates. So yeah, I mean, I guess beyond just that one point, like I think it'd be okay if we needed to push this because it is like complicated, and I don't think we're all aligned around like the exact design that's required here.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, feel free to say more on that. I kind of took that out as a request after the team call that you guys had last Friday. It was kind of established that that part didn't matter so much, that it was sort of an invitation for people to try and be manipulative. But since we're sort of defining more what counts as good faith and evaluating things one at a time, it makes it less likely for that to be an issue, was my understanding.
Yeah, I think that still holds true. I think the question is more around just like the KPI design and like what like Clayton and other people and the superhumans want to actually incentivize with UN, like going after like what types of projects rather than being like manipulation resistant, because I do agree with what you just said.
Okay.
And I think I know that this isn't necessarily the direction that we want to go with it, but it's worth considering again splitting this into two different KPI options, because it is sort of two different KPIs. If you're not somehow consolidating the whale bonus into like fitting in some way with the rest of it, it's really just two different numbers. It's like which ones are integrations meeting these criteria and which ones are integrations meeting these criteria. So that's also kind of simpler to reason about, but then you are dealing with two different tokens.
I did ask Clayton about that, and he said that sounds more complicated, and I like simple.
I'm not sure I agree it's more complicated.
Yeah.
But it's possible to do it different ways. It's just worth looking at again.
Yeah. I mean, I'm happy to make it whatever is kind of the consensus. I just sort of am operating on all of the different feedbacks that I'm getting at this point.
Yeah. It's a lot of different things on this one for sure.
Yeah.
And I think people have different opinions about different aspects of this. And I wish Clayton was here. Because I think, Britt, you and Clayton have had a lot of conversations around this.
Yeah. Well, and I'm happy to try and answer questions. I know we're like getting close to the end of our hour that's scheduled, but I think it kind of to your point, we haven't had a big opportunity for like discussion around with the goals here. So I'm just kind of clumping together feedback as I get it while trying to stick true to sort of the spirit behind the UMIP.
Can I just firstly, before anything, clarify timelines? Because it was my understanding that this UMIP has to go through this week because it has to be minted by the 1st of July or the 30th of June.
Not necessarily, no.
Can you say more on why? Because I was under that same impression, and I know Clayton is going to want to know.
So, like, we can always publish the airdrop list and stuff like that, like, before we actually have the tokens. So there's no kind of future airdrop requirement around this. I think also some people were mistakenly worrying about the rollover from the previous KPI options affecting the payout of those KPI options, and replacing that TVL with the new KPI options TVL, when in reality, like, the TVL from the previous KPI options won't actually leave the contract until it's settled. So I think those would be the two main reasons. And just like personally, I think it'd make more sense to like make sure we get UNT correct, rather than like trying to push something out quickly. Yeah.
So what you're suggesting is that the new KPI options would not be available to claim from the 1st.
Well, I don't think we were going to use a claim process anyways. And we were going to send them out kind of at our discretion, since the airdrop was going to be smaller anyways and kind of superhumans focused. And we can always like publish the list of recipients like without the contract created at all.
And we can still count integrations that came in, like, let's say the price identifier isn't ready till July 7th, but it counts integrations that started on like June 30th or July 1st. Like, that's also fine.
Yeah, I mean, we are counting all the way back to June 1st, basically.
Oh, yeah.
So okay. I guess technically that makes sense that it doesn't count. I think Clayton might be happy with instead if we just had more like hype about it starting on July 1st, like maybe an article and some tweets and stuff just to make it sound like official coming this week or something. Because if we just postpone by a week, that's not too bad, I don't think. But I don't know.
If it's split into two KPI options, now you get to announce twice.
That's true. I might let you be the one to tell him that.
I'll pitch him.
Yeah.
UNT and you will.
Yeah.
I think then if we've got time to push this, then I do think it's a great idea to push this for another week to have a bit more discussion, because it does seem really rushed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think some other big discussion points that people brought up were that like could take a week to discuss themselves would be like, why did we pick like these specific categories of products? Like, how do you tell like if they fit into these categories of products? Why exclude certain things, especially around like the optimistic Oracle and non-registered contract types? Like, how do you actually calculate like TVL for those, or like tell that an integration's actually happened or not? So I do think there are like just a lot of cans of worms that we need to open up here.
Cool. In that case, I think that really the rush can be solved with messaging. If we can message this, that kind of starts in the first, even though it's not actually going to be minted, then that kind of, keeps the momentum going.
And I don't know that we necessarily need to specify that it won't be minted by then, but just rather that we're still like ironing out the details of the distribution.
Yep.
Which is fine. So then my big question I get, because like the most progress that we've made on this has been in the last 24 hours in preparation for this call. How can I keep that momentum going throughout the week for discussing all these cans of worms? Because you're right, there are like a lot of good questions. And it sounds like there are some discussions going on that like some groups of people are a part of but not others, and just how do I bring everybody on board to the same page with discussing?
I think that perhaps we should maybe have a meeting later this week specifically to discuss this particular UMIP, perhaps with key superhumans and members of the team, to see if we can iron out some of this. How do you feel about that, Sean?
I like that idea. No.
I think that would be good too, because I would like to make sure our numbers are the most up to date in terms of how many integrations we won't consider slam dunks. I know I kind of like last minute asked Chandler if he had any info available, but he was sort of drowning in the hackathon. So what we have right now is really my best guess based on just looking at the data available to me, but that doesn't mean I'm right. So just kind of like nailing down our scale as well. It might be good to set up a meeting this week.
Okay, we'll set one up for kind of midweek, and I'll check calendars and send some invites out. Yeah, and we'll discuss it in the superhumans and see if we can get a time together. And
Perfect.
I think that'll give us a bit of a way forward in this.
Okay.
Also, big shout out to Britt here. Like, this is probably the hardest to define UMIP possible when you're like trying to define something qualitative and also like balancing everybody else's like expectations. So good job.
Yeah, I think it's kind of fun. As I'm like writing this, I have you and Rainus in mind for sure. I'm like, they're gonna hate this little bit, but we're just gonna take out the black and white altogether, and we're just gonna make everything gray as we possibly can. So it's fun. I kind of like it. It's very unusual.
Uncomfortable.
Yes, it's uncomfortable, but I think it's good. I think it is good. It will be a good demonstration of the power of what we can do. Just because it is so, it's kind of like saying, what is the price of ETH on a cloudy Tuesday in 4 months from now or something? Like, it's just very weird.
You have to specify time zones too with that one.
Yeah, but see, I mean, if you want it to be black and white.
Cool.
Okay, what I'm going to put in for this is push to next week for the discussion needed about approach and team and superhuman meeting to discuss. Are people happy with that?
Yep.
Excellent. Okay. Is there anyone? We're actually 4 minutes over time, but is there anything else that people want to bring up quickly?
Nope. Thank you all.
Thanks to everyone for attending again.
All right. Thank you.
See ya.
See ya.
Bye.
See ya.